Welcome everyone to another edition of D&I One-on-One. In case you didn't notice, I'm the only one on camera today because our guest Sylvia is having some technical challenges, but that's okay.
Oh God, yes.
And
Oh my
no,
goodness.
to keep it even, I'm going to go off camera. That way our guests and our attendees can focus on the visuals that we've provided. So to start, I
Excellent.
just want to introduce Sylvia. Sylvia is a CPA and founder of and managing partner of PrietoDion Consulting, a state and local advisory firm. So Sylvia and I, quote unquote, met on Twitter as part of the tax community, the
Right.
tech Twitter community. She's an entrepreneur, an industry leader, a mother, and a SALT expert. She previously had positions with Ernst & Young, EY, and Grant Thornton, and worked in the corporate tax departments of a number of different high-tech software and manufacturing companies. She's a self-described, proud Mexican-American Latina and is passionate about serving as a role model for younger Latinos considering careers in accounting, tax, and law. So Sylvia, thank you so much for joining me today, which is the second to the last day of National
Yep.
Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yes, excellent, excellent. Well, first of all, Gina, thank you very much for having me on one of your one-on-one sessions. I have listened in on several of these. They're always fantastic. And I mean, I really genuinely am honored to be here. So thank you very much for inviting me. I think we've got some great stuff that we're going to talk about today. I know you've put together some phenomenal slides just talking about, percentages and the, sadly, lack of minorities and Latinos in public accounting, and of course I'd love to speak a little bit about, just obviously being a Latina, a proud Mexican-American Latina, working in public accounting for many, many years, public accounting and industry. So I have many, many years of experience. I like to refer to myself as a seasoned professional, okay, parentheses old, older, okay. But anyway, I think we've got some great stuff to talk about today, and I'm just looking forward to having this conversation with you. So I'll kind of lead it back to you. I know you've got some stuff to go through, which is great.
Well, I think a great place to start is let's talk about National Hispanic Heritage Month. We know it runs from September 15 to October 15. And so I have the slide up. I don't know if you can see the slides, but I have the slide up that
I can see them.
Sort of a little description about it. Can you talk a little bit more about what this is and what this means?
Well, as you probably see a lot of stuff in the media. For those of you who are participants today who are not Latino or Hispanic, is obviously this is National Hispanic Heritage Month, and it's a month that goes from the middle of September to the middle of October. And it was proclaimed several years ago as being a national kind of a month of celebration of Latinos and the Hispanic heritage and all the contributions that have been made by Latinos and Hispanics during the course of our U.S. history. So it's a time when, we really, me, myself, I feel like I celebrate being Latina all the time, and I talk about it. I'm so proud of it, but it's certainly a time to be more vocal about it, share stories, prominent Latinos, some of the things that they have done. It's just so many things, contributions that they've made, in all different industries. So it's just a time where, as a Latina, Hispanic, you're, on my perspective, you're more vocal, you're celebrating who we are and the contributions that we've made to our United States. And once again, it sort of spans this 1 month period. Gina, as you show on the slide, September 15th was chosen as the kickoff because it coincides with the independence celebration in several of the South American countries. El 16 de septiembre, which is the day after September the 15th, September the 16th is actually Mexico's formal Independence Day. So it sort of coincides with the independence of many of the countries whose ancestors we all came from. So that's just kind of a little bit about that there.
Thank you. I think for many there was some confusion as to why it's not a calendar month. So corresponding to some pretty important holidays and days that mark very significant events in history are really
right.
Now, I'm going to put up here now
Exactly.
this slide about, you talked
Yeah.
about different terminology here. We hear people
Right.
saying Latino, we hear people talking about using the word Hispanic. I read a very interesting article today. I think it was in the New York Times, or maybe it was Pew Research Center, talking about why people use these different terms. And I think in the context of diversity and inclusion, too often our conversations when we talk about D&I work, they focus on race, and then we look at gender from a male-female perspective. And
Right.
when we talk about race, we often lean more into African American. And so while there's some talk about the Latino and Hispanic community, there's not a lot. So can you help us understand the terms? And then what does it mean for your ethnicity and identity to be more meaningfully included in D&I work?
Right, right. So, I tend to use both terms. I tend to refer to myself more so as a Latina than I use the term Hispanic. But as you see here in your lovely chart that Jina put together, many people of different Latino ethnicities are consider themselves both Latino and Hispanic. So that's kind of what you see sort of there in the middle. People from Mexico with Mexican heritage, you're Latino, you're Hispanic. But you look at a couple of perfect examples. There's other countries besides the ones that you see on the far right and far left, but this particular diagram really kind of highlights two prime examples, one being Spain. The people from Spain, they are Hispanic, but they're not Latino because their ancestry is not from a Latin American country. On the other side, you've got Brazil. People from Brazil refer to themselves as Latino, but they're not Hispanic because they basically are not. They basically are Latino because they're from a Latin American country. They're from South America, but they're not Hispanic. So the terms are used interchangeably for people who don't understand the terms. They really are used interchangeably. Many of us, like us with Mexican heritage, Central American heritage, South American heritage, we'll refer to ourselves as either Hispanic or Latino. So, use the terms interchangeably. I tend to say Latina, Latino, because that's what I'm more comfortable with, but I certainly, refer to myself as a Hispanic CPA, Hispanic person also. So does that help a little bit?
No, absolutely. And I think it's really important for us to continually reinforce this language so that when we are speaking and we want to be using inclusive language, that we are respecting and reflecting all of those different ethnicities. Now, before we go any
Exactly.
further, I know I forgot to launch our very first polling question. So Autumn, can we go with polling question number 1? We'll launch that.
Oh, sure. Let me get that up and running for you. All right, y'all should be able to see that on your screen. As a reminder, we'll have 4 polls during the presentation, and you need to answer at least 3 of them to earn full credit. I'll leave each open for a minute to make sure everyone has an opportunity to vote.
So I know our time for commentary during polling questions is limited, but I'll toss this out there in case this helps. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Sylvia, but for one of the simplest ways to think about the differences between Latino and Hispanic, it comes down to Hispanic references the language and Latino references all of the different countries, the diaspora, if you will, of countries that are in Latin America, which
Right.
means Mexico isn't considered Latino because it's not in Latin America. Um, and we've heard the word Pan-Asian. I think one of the things to think about in the context of Latino and Hispanic culture is almost like Pan-Latino. But let's go ahead and see what the results are in this polling question. I know we're over.
Okay.
Sure, closing in 3, 2, and 1, sharing those results with y'all. So 38% said yes, followed by 28% no,
Well,
and then some of them not sure, prefer not to answer.
okay. Okay.
Well, that's promising. I think that almost 40% of organizations are recognizing Heritage Months. One of the things that I've started to notice more, certainly in my work, is that they might not formally recognize those months, but they certainly encourage and support celebrations. So, for example, an employee resource group might hold a luncheon to celebrate and recognize it, a Heritage Month, even though the firm doesn't have like a formal statement or the organization doesn't put out a press release or something like that, or make posts on social media. And I think, so there are a lot of ways to recognize different heritage months, even if your organization doesn't formally celebrate it.
Yeah. And actually, I just wanted, you made me think of something, Jina. One of the pre-conversations that you and I had, I had kind of shared a lot of information out there right now, which is wonderful. So, I'm always looking at anything that comes my way on Hispanic Heritage Month, Latinos CPAs, etc. But there was an article put out recently, short article by a human resource organization, and literally it was called, how to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month the right way. And I love that. And again, it was in one of the human resource journals that was directed to human resource professionals. And it had some great ideas, some of what you talked about, maybe having a lunch, kind of some of the different things that companies can do to kind of recognize and help celebrate. One of the things that what the article talked about is, really getting management involved, okay, getting the upper tiers of managers involved in this, and, really kind of making it a very positive thing. So I love hearing that this is happening more, that more people, like the results on the poll, that 40% said, yeah, we celebrate it or we recognize it, which is absolutely wonderful.
Now, one of the questions that came in already, and folks, I encourage you, put your questions in. I'll bring them up throughout, and then we'll hold some till the end as well. But love to get your thoughts then on why do you think there are so few Latinos CPA?
Oh my goodness,
I'm putting up
that
here the
is
Census Bureau
absolutely
data, just so that's helpful to you.
Great question. I'll tell you, I've been, a CPA professional for many years. And, it's funny because sometimes I'll think to myself, I just don't see that things have changed all that much. In my almost 30 years of experience, I don't see that things have changed that much. And great question, by the way, because as I said a little while ago, anything that I see that's of interest to me, dealing with lack of CPAs in the industry, just anything, okay, everything just catches my attention. I read it, and recently I came across a study that was conducted by it was a study that was conducted by the University of Texas at one of the satellite schools, and it was the study was funded by a grant from the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. And it's a wonderful, very comprehensive, a lot of statistics in this particular study. And one of the things that the study talks about is, or what the focus of the study is actually, is inhibiting factors, or why Hispanic Latinos are less likely to sit for the CPA exam, and why so few pursue the CPA designation. And some of the factors that they came up in this very comprehensive, very well thought out study is factors such as lack of role models. That was one of the factors they identified: lack of role models, the need to fulfill the 150 hours in order to sit for the CPA exam. Many college level degrees, you don't get that 150 hours, so you almost have to kind of pursue a postgraduate degree to get that 150 hours. And for many Latinos, that's cost prohibitive. Even going to college, many of them are first year Latinos, they get to college, many of them can't afford to pursue a degree past that undergraduate degree, lack of support even from their own families, or just their families not really understanding, what is the CPA designation? Why are you doing that? Having family responsibilities was another factor that came up. Having this feeling that the test is too difficult, or they can't pass the test, not having support from their employer, not working at a company, let's say they're already out working, not working for a company that supports them, pursuing the CPA exam. So it's somewhat of a vicious cycle. We're not getting enough Latinos pursuing the CPA designation because of all of these different factors. And again, it's a phenomenal study. I'm going to pull up the name of it in a little while so I can tell everyone what it's called. But basically, there's a lot of factors such as what I just said. Latinos, first, even second generation Latinos like myself, you're not growing up with role models. I didn't have any role models growing up. I didn't know anybody who was in business or an accountant, who, many of my relatives didn't even graduate high school. I had no one to look to kind of understand what it means to be an accountant, what it means to be a CPA. And you're still finding, that was 30 years ago, okay, when I first started my career, but you're still finding that today. So you're still finding these various factors that are keeping Latinos in general from pursuing the CPA designation and thereby moving up the ranks in the CPA industry, going on to becoming managers, senior managers, and partners at the different, at the firms, the CPA firms, because they don't have the support, and they've got all these demotivational factors and all these obstacles that's kind of keeping them from pursuing the CPA license. So that's a great question, Gina. I'm so glad that you brought that up.
Oh, I'll give that credit to, I think it was Karina who asked that question from our Q&A.
Excellent.
It's interesting.
Excellent.
Because
I just pulled up exactly, let me just very quickly, if anybody's interested in looking up this particular study, it is called An Examination of the Demotivational Factors Inhibiting Hispanic Students' Participation in the CPA exam. I mean, isn't that perfect? And basically in the introduction, I love the first couple of sentences in the introduction to the study. And it says, diversity in the accounting profession is a welcome notion, and the stakeholders appreciate its strategic importance to the profession. However, reaching a diversity goal remains elusive to the profession. And one of the statistics they quote in here is a study that was put out by the ASCPA in 2019, that only 4% of CPAs are Hispanic or Latino. That's a dismal percentage. But anyway, that's the name of the study. And if you're a stakeholder on today, you're a partner, if you're a HR professional, there's somebody who's really interested in this topic, I really recommend that you look at this particular study. So it was excellently done.
Well, for what it's worth, there's some good news. And what I have on the screen is the ethnicity breakdown of CPAs. It's from the 2021 AICPA Trends Report. And we need to take the Trends Report with a grain of salt because it's really speaking to public accounting firms and only those that participate in this study.
Right.
But still, it's really insightful information. And what we can see here, that orange slice for everyone looking, because I know it's really small print, says that 5% of CPAs are Latino. Now, while that represents movement in the right direction, I'm going to go with 4% to 5% over a couple of years. Probably not something to celebrate, but to see as an indication that if we put in the work, perhaps we can start to see the results.
Right. Exactly. And I'll tell you, just going back quickly to that study, I mean, that's one of the things that they identified was really kind of starting at the college level, identifying the Latino accounting students before they've graduated and, being mentors, getting them involved before they actually graduate from college so that they can sort of see, the benefits and becoming a CPA, what it's all about.
Yeah, I've got up here trends in degree completions, also from the 2021 Trends Report. And one of the things we'll notice here is that as you look across, pick any color on that stack, purple, green, blue, orange, red, they're fairly flat. And that's going back from 2013 to 2019. And we've started to see, now there's a lag, there's been a lot of effort put into D&I work, particularly since George Floyd over the last couple of years. So I'm hopeful that the 2023 Trends Report, because it comes out every other year, might start to show some progress because we'll see some of the results from the efforts over the last 2 years. Now, I'm not predicting it, but I just wanted to put that up there because there is data that we can now look at. And for organizations doing work in the D&I space, looking for a benchmark, this is one data point, one resource.
This is great.
Benchmarking as we work on this effort. Now, Sylvia, I want to redirect this just a wee bit because there have been two things that we've brought up. And brings us to this idea of intersectionality. And, you know, you and I talked about this in the lead up to the presentation to today's session. You sit at the crossroads between being a woman and then being Latina, and that
Yes.
the efforts from a D&I perspective often focus on women, or they focus on people in terms of ethnicity, but you fall in between. So is there something that you're experiencing as the proud Mexican American woman where there's a
Yes.
gap, and that perhaps if we can identify that in a way that can support
Yes.
you, it can support so many women regardless of ethnicity, as well as Hispanics and Latinos regardless of gender. Does that make sense?
Right. It does make sense. And, you know, and I think what you're saying is that a lot of diversity and inclusion, you know, goals or studies maybe focus on one or the other, but not sort of both, you know, Latina, Hispanic, mother, all is one. And I can certainly attest to the fact that, you know, there's, I'd say things to overcome or challenges, there you go. There are challenges as a Latina CPA, challenges as a woman CPA, challenges as a working mother CPA. It's a whole nother area there, okay? And, you know, focusing on the person that is dealing with all of these different things is important. I don't know if that's the best way of putting it or not, Gina, because this is your sort of your cup of tea. This is what you do. You meet with companies and you help them understand that. So I'm just adding that as a, you know, Latina CPA, female CPA, working mother CPA, there are challenges that I face because I'm all three. And usually when you hear about D&I initiatives and the focus is on Latinas or Latinos or working mothers or mothers, it's not the person who's kind of everything. And I'm not the only minority that was going through this. So you have, you know, African American CPAs, working mothers, you know, Asian, you know, mothers, CPAs. It's the same thing. They're probably dealing with a lot of the same things that I have endured or have had to deal with. Again, the challenges, should I say, because I'm not only a Latina, but I'm a mother, I'm a working mother, and being a working mother in our profession is not easy, as you probably know. So yeah, it's definitely that intersectionality, love the term, does come into play. Is that kind of what you were asking?
Yeah, no, I think it's a challenge because for anyone that falls into, well, let me say it this way. In D&I efforts, we tend to group people. We organize people into groups, and then we try to serve the group. And what we're not
Yes.
necessarily doing is serving people who fall in multiple groups. So,
Right.
but let's not, you know, poo-poo the whole work that we're doing. I think what we're talking about is just really understanding what the impact of and the importance of understanding
Right.
intersectionality.
Right.
And leaning into, okay, hint, Autumn, we're about to go to our second polling question here. The other aspect I think we've been talking a lot about is cultural awareness, that understanding the richness behind the different ethnicities. And today we're focusing on Hispanic and Latino ethnicity, but a large part of D&I efforts revolves around this awareness. And so the polling question is, if your organization offers cultural awareness training. So let's see the results on that.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
All right, poll number 2 is up and running. Does your organization offer cultural awareness training?
So I will say,
and Gina, whoops, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I'd love to hear your take on this is what you do. I know this is your focus. So you probably do offer cultural awareness training for organizations. Is that correct?
Okay, hold on. I'm not trying to give it away yet. Let's see what other folks are saying.
Okay, yeah. All
right. Nice try, Sylvia. I will say, while the poll is open, I think I got like 30 seconds here. There are quite a few questions in the Q&A, and I want to make sure we allot some time for that. So just folks, keep putting your questions in. They're questions, Sylvia. They're not easy ones, by the way, but they're great questions, and so keep putting them in there. All right, so let's see. We're almost at the end of the poll.
Yes, almost there. Again, this is poll number 2 out of 4. Going to close this one down in 3, 2, and 1 sharing those results. 44% with yes, 31% no,
Oh,
21% not sure.
All right, so the CPA and me can't do math. 44% yes and 21% not sure means if the not sures mostly have in there some, then we're at
okay.
And then
65%.
and then
Yes or maybe.
31% with no and 5% prefer not to answer.
Yeah. So the third that says no, there's an opportunity. And to your question, Sylvia, I'm starting to see from my clients an interest in cultural awareness training. And I think that's the next thing
Okay.
to see, because now that we have increased visibility of that there are different dimensions of diversity, and we're starting to
Right.
understand that it is those dimensions collectively and the work around supporting those different communities, that is the
Right.
D&I work. And so now we need to understand the communities better. Now, I want to go back to
It's,
something else. This was
okay.
something very important to you, so I want to make sure we bring it up, speaking to intersectionality, because you talked about ethnicity, but what about gender? Now, let's start here with the pay gap, because I think
Oh my God. Yes.
that is a part of a big part of the challenge, especially as women move forward in their careers.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. And we've
So,
heard a lot about the pay gap, right, with women, and it's even more so with Hispanic women. There was the Lean In organization. I know, Gina, you and I talked about this. They've got some great information out there, some great statistics, and some great graphics where they show, and this is not necessarily CPA, the CPA related to the CPA profession, but Latinas in general. And just like your chart shows here, I mean, Hispanic earning 56 cents on the dollar for a white man. One of the things that the Lean In organization's graphics also showed is that the gap gets larger the more educated the woman is. So the more educated you are, according to the Lean In organization's statistics, the pay gap gets even larger, which I thought was somewhat shocking. But most certainly, the pay gap exists, and as a Latina woman, the statistics are out there. And personally, I mean, I do feel like I've been impacted by that, just my own personal perspective, more so from the standpoint that, I've thought about my own compensation when I was working in public accounting, and, just my own thought is that I do think that I was making less than my white male counterparts. No proof, just my thoughts, okay?
yeah, and I think this is why the other thing I'm starting to see. So we spent a lot of time working on diversity, and a lot of organizations, many of you have organizations that have programs that start to see the diversity. And then a lot of the work focuses on inclusion, which speaks to what it feels like, how we want people to feel working in our organizations. So we're starting
Right.
to see more in the equity space, and equity is going to be something like a pay equity audit, where we go beyond your I think it's effective to organizations that
Right.
can start to actually look to see what does that mean, because that pay gap translates over the course of a career. I think I saw a data point in preparing for this that the cumulative effect specifically for Latina is from the moment she starts her career to the end of her career, $1 million less earning.
Exactly. I
Because
saw that statistic too.
cascades.
Yep, exactly. And that's a great point. And it goes back to what I was just talking about with that study with Latinos not wanting to pursue their CPA license because of all these various factors, but we're not still in the pipeline because there are these factors that's preventing the younger Latinos from pursuing their CPA license. We're seeing 5%, as you showed a little while ago on your screen, Jina, but it's got a long way to go. We've got a very long way to go. And here we're seeing, pointing out kind of the loss of income for a Latina over the course of their career of $1 million because of that pay gap. So we're seeing, minorities and women, there's still so much, we should be doing so much more. I mean, things could be improving so much more. So I just love that you brought that up here just a minute ago.
Now it's funny, you keep crediting me with bringing it up, but Sylvia, you you actually shared a lot of these insights with me, and so you're being very gracious. But I want to attribute this back to you because, in our planning, one of the things you mentioned and is that, and I'm going to see if I can quote you here. I'm glad I'm not on
Oh,
camera
no.
because you would see that I'm struggling to read without my reading glasses. But you said that one of the challenges is that when you fall into multiple groups, that you have to put in a lot of effort to assimilate and to feel like you can prove yourself and adapt in a organization that is predominantly male because you're a double minority.
Right.
Can you share a little bit more about what that feels like to you? This idea that um, when I
Yeah.
fall into these minority groups, what do
Right.
we mean by assimilation? What is that? How does that feel for you?
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, and I'm just going to sort of bring one little thing up that you and I had talked about, and that's that article that was done by Peter Riley in Forbes. So several years ago, let me just tell the audience, several years ago, Peter Riley is a contributor to Forbes, and several years ago, he was doing a series on women in accounting, and he interviewed, there you go, he interviewed
Ta-da.
several women in
Oh, wait, and by
accounting
the way,
as a result.
Sylvia, I
Uh-huh.
got the link. I got the link, and
Oh,
Autumn's going to push it out
excellent.
to the audience so that if you all want to read this, which I recommend you
Okay.
do,
Yes.
you'll be able to
Yes.
find that link in the chat. But
Yes.
okay,
And
you were
Grant, this is,
talking about his
yes.
interview.
And this, thank you, Gina. It's wonderful. So I was, working in public accounting at the time, and, Mexican American Latina mother, working mother. Okay. And boy, I was juggling it all. My kids were young at the end, and I really didn't feel like I had support of the partner group. Well, lo and behold, this is one of the bigger firms in Austin. In Boston, Boston, and that I was working for. And they don't mention the name of the firm in the article, but people could pretty much figure out who they were. But there was a meeting where the partner in charge of the office had they're rolling out some new leadership positions, not necessarily partner positions, but leadership positions. People that are going to be in charge of certain things, certain areas, certain initiatives. And he's going down the list, and he calls a meeting. I was a senior manager at the time, calling a meeting with the managers and senior managers, talking about these new initiatives that are coming on board and who's going to be heading up the initiatives. And I'm looking at this list, and I literally said out loud in the meeting, where are the women? Like, where are the women on this list? Why are there no women on this list? You mean to tell me there are not any qualified women to head up any of these areas? I mean, it was just, oh my God, the kind of thing that I saw, okay, in public accounting. And then here I am, a Mexican American Latina, and Peter has a little blurb in there in the article. This is his words, not mine. He's saying that he was sure that the office, they were shocked for this Mexican American Latina to be bringing this up, okay, to be speaking out, to be bringing this up. So, it again kind of goes back to the whole working mother scenario, how, that is definitely, you've got to work extra hard. You're a minority, you've got to work extra hard. And that's one thing that I'll say to younger Latinos, coming up. You are going to have to work extra hard. You are going to have to prove yourself because, as we see from the statistics, you're still very much a small percentage of the profession, and we do have to work. We really do have to work harder. Prove ourselves, give 110%, because we have to overcome, I guess, the cultural awareness, with the term that you're using here, Gina, what people's perceptions might be, people who are not, Hispanic, Latino, people of color, upper management, what their perceptions might be. We are going to have to work. You are going to have to work extra hard. You are going to have to, give 110%. But I don't know, does this kind of touch in with what you were asking about?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what's important for everyone to recognize is that to some degree, all of us, regardless of gender or race or dimension of difference, we all feel that sense of isolation from time to time. We might all feel like we have to put in a little bit of effort to quote unquote fit in.
Right.
But I think the point around for minorities is it is a disproportionate amount of work, largely because when you walk into a room and you are the only one or one of a few, there's this natural tendency to want to gravitate toward the majority. And And so anyone, if a man has been in a room and it's all women, you know that feeling of feeling like, oh, I'm the only one. And so, but the person who's the minority has that feeling every day at work. And so that's really,
Right.
thank you for sharing that. I think that's really, it's a question of awareness and appreciation.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I love hearing that you're seeing more of that cultural awareness training. I mean, I think
Absolutely.
it really kind of ties right in with everything that you're doing. So I love hearing that you're doing more of that.
A related area of training, and if you have an organization that is doing a lot of work in this space, one of the things to think about, there's a program I do called Dimensions of Diversity. And that's really
Mm,
walking through a little bit more deeply what these things mean, what is it around the group, especially taking the stigma or fear or anxiety out of talking about certain things. For example, nobody wants to talk about race because it's sensitive. Well, let's talk about when we say race, what does it mean, to take some of that anxiety out. Now I'm
right.
looking at the clock. It's 3:40. I want to leave some time for Q&A. So I'm going to bring us to this because we talked about this. If I knew then what I know now. So Sylvia, can you share some of your, whew, if I knew then what I know now thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because I was just talking to somebody else about this, my experience when I first started out as a young accounting student. Well, when I was still an accounting student, getting my undergraduate degree in accounting and interviewing for accounting jobs in my senior year. And I knew nothing about how to interview, how to dress, what kind of questions were going to be asked. Like I said, I had no role models. I didn't know anyone who was in my immediate family and my extended family who was a business person, who was a CPA. And I, looking back, oh my God. So going to my, one of my first accounting interviews, and this is of course back in the 1980s. And you got the big, big hair, poofy hair. I've got a flashy outfit on. I wore bronze-colored pumps. Okay, I didn't know how to answer any interview questions, and yeah, I just think that's a great example of like, if I knew then what I knew now. I wish that I knew more then, and I wish that I'd had role models and I'd had the resources that are available today to kind of have helped me prepare. Because honestly, I was a joke. Okay, let's just say it. I was embarrassed. I was a joke, and I could have like crawled under a hole and said, "Okay, gee, that's it. I'm not going to interview anymore." But instead, it sort of, made me do the opposite. It made me, a little bit stronger. I said, okay, I'm going to be that much more prepared for my next interview. So if I knew what I knew then, I think my perspective, it's a little different because my career spans so many years. I've been a tax professional for basically 30 years. So I graduated with my undergraduate degree and my graduate degree back in the 1980s. And back then we didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We didn't have, you think about how things have changed in these 30 years. I didn't have where I could go on the internet and look up some interviewing, video. So it's totally different for somebody now. But I guess part of that is I'm encouraging, if you're a young person who's just starting your career, if you're still in college and you're on this webinar, prepare yourself. There's so much information out there. And I guess kind of turning that, Gina, if you don't mind, I'd like to also maybe touch a little bit, you and I talked a little bit about, maybe advice to stakeholders, advice to managers
Sure.
and management. And,
Before
and
you
what,
do that,
oh,
Sylvia, if I can just chime in, there are two thoughts that came to mind, if that's okay.
okay.
One, I heard this really moving story from a colleague, leader in the profession. He's Italian, I think he's either first or second generation in this country, and did something similar, showed up for an interview, and he was dressed in a way that was completely appropriate for the culture that he was in, but fell outside the norms for an accounting firm, and felt
Right.
instantly, oh, if I had known, I would have dressed differently. And of course, he was pulled aside and coached and mentored and very quickly understood, and not in a way that was judgy or embarrassing. And so ended up being a positive experience. So that was one point, that
Okay.
that there are a lot of things that can feed into that type of discomfort. I wanted to just raise awareness for our participants. And then the other thing is, even
Right.
today with the internet, and with so much readily available information, if you tap into the wrong piece of information. So I would encourage people to read multiple sources, and
Right.
as well as think about things, specifically look outside of your cultural norms, because it's so much more broad than that. And we all tend to fall into our comfortable place. So
Right.
that's
Right.
the only thing that I wanted to share. So then you were going to share one more tip?
Well, it was really kind of turning this over to, or looking at, what I wish management would know, or kind of tips, advice for management stakeholders when they are, working with young Latinos, or Latinos in general, or any minority group, But when it comes to Latinos, and one of the things, you and I talked about this, was that is for many of us, because, the way we were raised, or our background is so different to like where we are, how we're living today in our profession. I mean, I came from a very traditional Mexican American family, and everybody spoke Espanol, and Mexican food, and I mean, going across the border to Mexico all the time, and but as a result, what I feel is that, I think that I have a certain amount of emotional intelligence, I guess is the term that's being used a lot these days, where I'm able to um, operate, manage myself in different kinds of environments. So now I've been a professional for many years, so I can function well in a professional environment, but I'm just totally and completely comfortable going into Mexico and hanging out with family, and doing all the Mexican things that we do, and that the ability to be somewhat of a chameleon, to be able to read the room, to be able to manage yourself well in different environments, that's a very valuable skill set in public accounting. So I feel like, stakeholders management, think about that. Think about your professionals that are coming from very diverse backgrounds, and their ability to, again, operate some of the obstacles they've had to deal with, and their ability to operate in different environments. That can be very much a positive thing. And, really, really holding yourself to be out to be a mentor, and really offering true guidance and advice. And I've got one quick story. This is something that I didn't talk about, when we talked before. But one of the things I wanted to add is that those mentors as a young Latino or a young minority professional entering the CPA world, they don't have to be Latinos or another person of color or another minority. It could be somebody who is just someone who really has a genuine interest in mentoring and supporting and guiding you as a professional, who is really genuinely interested in increasing diversity and inclusion in their firm. Now, a quick little story, again, Gina, we didn't really talk about this, but many years ago, I was working at Ernst & Young, and was a senior manager there at the time, and we were looking to start a chapter of what used to be the American Association of Hispanic CPAs. It has now become the Association of Latino Professionals in Finance and Accounting, or ALFA. You probably heard of ALFA, Gina. But at that time, it was still called the American Association of Hispanic CPAs, and I had been involved in the organization many years prior when I was living in Texas. And, I went to Human Resources and said, some of the leadership from this organization, they want to come to Boston. I'd like for us to sponsor, kind of a luncheon here. We want to start a chapter in Boston. And I was like the first president of the Alpha chapter in Boston, which is way back in like the late 1990s. But there are a couple of partners that stand out to me, and neither one was a minority. They were white individuals, white men. One was named Mark, one was named Tim, and they were just the absolute greatest supporters, greatest mentors. They really wanted, they just came forward, said, what can we do to help you? What can we do? Attended the luncheon, spoke at the luncheon. I mean, they were great mentors. They were great supporters. So you look for those people. It may not be somebody who is a Latino or a minority or a person of color, but seek out those stakeholders, management that genuinely has an interest in, doing this for the industry and helping young people of my color, young minorities really make their way in the world. And I mean, Tim, and I look back, especially Tim, he was such an amazing mentor to me. Oh my goodness, he's a state and local tax partner. I was in the SALT practice at Ernst & Young in Boston. And I mean, he was just like the greatest, mentor that I could have. So those people are out there. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of throw that out. So,
that's fantastic.
you're a stakeholder, and you really don't hold back. And don't, I guess the other thing, kind of going back to if I knew what I knew, or maybe just kind of advice for younger.
So, Sylvia,
be proud.
Can I interrupt for a quick?
We got to go to Q&A.
We're gonna have to do a polling question, and so while that polling question is open, maybe that you can share that point while it's open. Does that work?
That sounds great.
All right.
Poll number 3 is up and running.
So we got a minute. What were you going to say, Sylvia? I'm sorry to have interrupted.
I'm sorry. You get me going on this, see, Janet, and I just want to go on and on.
Well, I think your point is well taken, and there's a term for that, by the way. It's called allyship, and allyship is someone who champions for and supports a group that they're not a member of. So, for example, if I am cisgender and I am supportive of the LGBTQ community, I'm an ally. If I am a single person and I champion for the support of people who are married or parents, sorry, not married, but parents, and I don't have any kids, I'm an ally. And you're talking about allies. And by the way, I hope Tim is listening so he knows that he's had that wonderful impact on you. So anyway, I see the poll is wrapping up.
Yep, closing in 3, 2, and 1. I'll share those results. 41% said somewhat familiar, followed by 30% with not very familiar, 19% very familiar, and a close tie of 6 and 5% of this is all new to me and prefer not to answer.
That's great.
Okay.
Well, I want to share as we go to Q&A, Sylvia, I'll share what are actually comments more than questions. First of all, somebody said, go Alpha. So there you go. Alpha is a great organization. I encourage you to look for it. ALPFA is what it goes by as an acronym.
Yes.
The next one was Christopher. And I just want to thank you for sharing this. Christopher said he's a male on a team of 8. The rest of the team are women, and I sometimes feel left out. So that's just validation that when you're one of a few, the rest of us, the majority, we just want to keep that in mind. And then the other comment that somebody made was the correcting me earlier, Mexico is part of Latin America. It is Spain that is not. So thank you, Virginia, for sharing that. I think one of the confusing things about Mexico is that depending on how it's defined, there's North America, Central America, South America. There are actually slightly different definitions of what's considered Latin America. And for many, Mexico is in fact considered Latin America. And so I do thank you for sharing that. I would love one day for there to be like definitive answers.
Exactly.
Right, so
let me just throw out, I do consider, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry about that. Let me just throw real quick, Mexico, Latin America versus North America, the continent. So I do consider Mexico to be Latin America, even though it is part of North America, the continent. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, so the first question came in way back earlier. It's from Todd. Todd says, I'm a CPA and a Mexican American, first generation college grad. Went to law school, worked up to becoming senior VP of a Fortune 250 company in tax. Also teaches tax and has always been surprised at the lack of Latinos along his career track. How would you recommend Latinos get out there and be more aggressive? And I think this is more about organizations more aggressively recruit. So do you think is there one tip you can provide anyone who's a recruiter listening on something that they can do to look at bringing in more Latinos into their organization?
Yes, exactly. One thing I would ask is where, depending on where they are geographically, the companies, if they are in an area of the country where you have universities, colleges that serve a largely Latino community, like the UT school system, University of Texas at El Paso, where I got my undergraduate degree from, is 80% Latino students, but you've got other schools, across the country that have a very high percentage of Latino Latino students, Latino organizations at the university. So you're going to have Alpha, you're going to have the UT Austin Latino Hispanic organization. Seek out basically as a company who's trying to recruit. Is I'm going to go back to that study that I talked about. Go approaching or finding these students when they're still in college and forming those relationships. Okay, life goes both ways. As a young Latino, forming relationships with potential employers, but as employers also finding those younger Latinos who are in their junior, senior year in college, getting their accounting degrees, and identifying them and finding them and getting out to the career fairs and getting out and doing recruiting, at the different universities, finding out what are the Latino Hispanic organizations at the different universities. Is there one? And you'd be surprised. Even I said some of the universities, focusing on universities that have a high Latino percentage, but even the universities that don't have a high Latino percentage may have organizations that are geared towards Latinos, Hispanics, minorities. So that would be kind of some of the advice that I would give, is really trying to identify, focusing on Latinos now at a younger level, junior, senior year in college, identifying them, getting to know them, finding out what the organizations are, and that would be my advice. And going back to what this person just said, I see the same thing. I mean, I've been a tax professional for 30 years, okay, almost 30 years, and I don't see that much has changed. So there's so much more that we can be doing.
Yeah. There are a couple of questions in here about how do we get more Latinos and Latina CPAs? How do we get more Latinos in the student pipeline? There are a lot of questions, folks. I'm sorry, we're not going to really get to many more of them. They're all such rich and complex questions, but we do get the Q&A after the session, and we'll try to follow up with those of you who have questions and we weren't able to answer. I'll also say, just as a reminder, that if you look on Sylvia's bio slide right here at the bottom, you'll see her email address. And their contact information is here. Certainly invite her to connect on LinkedIn, follow her on Twitter. She's got some great stuff on Twitter.
Yep.
And then the other thing I would
please
add.
Feel free to contact. Yes, feel free to please anybody reach out. I'm going to just throw one more thing, Gina. I'm sorry.
Sure.
You and I both love to chat, don't we? But, and then just advice again, Latino, please do not be afraid to be proud of your heritage. Man, I am a proud Mexican American Latina. I've got that right on my Twitter profile. Proud Mexican American Latina. If somebody doesn't want to follow me because I'm a proud Mexican American Latina, so be it. But I want people to know that. I really do. And I just please be proud of who you are, where you came from, what you've achieved. So important.
Yeah, no, I totally
Back to you, Gina.
Well, yeah. And I had my contact slide up there as well. You're welcome to reach out to me as well. I've actually had some people do that, but I just wanted to encourage you because these are wonderful questions. So I will give you, Sylvia, the final thought before we wrap up. If there's any last thought you want to share, we only have like a minute or two left.
Oh my gosh, yes. I don't know. I feel like I've shared so much already. And, again, Gina, thank you so much for, allowing me to participate. I really sincerely appreciate it. I guess another thought is you just mentioned my contact information. And I'm very serious when I say that I am here to support and mentor. And if you're a young professional, young Latino professional, you want to reach out to me, I'm literally inviting you to do that. Be proud of who you are. Like I said a little while ago, just don't hold back. Don't, try to downplay it. It's something to be really proud of. And, we need more Latinos in accounting, more people of color in accounting. You need to change the industry. Going back to the article that the research article that I talked about, there's such a demand. It talks about kind of the demand for accounting professionals is so huge, right? If you just, the industry, we need more professionals. We need more, younger people deciding they want to go into accounting, they want to become CPAs. And, there's just so much that can be done. I don't know, that kind of thing wraps it up.
So you're saying be proud of who you are.
Oh God, definitely.
Don't hide your heritage, and let's find people that we can mentor and encourage. And so those are wonderful.
Exactly. Find those mentors. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
So important.
I will add, because I want to make sure this gets in there, and Autumn, if you can push the link.
Yes, I have. And may I go ahead and launch that last poll while we do that?
Absolutely, please. So the last poll, I believe, is open. And while it's open, I have on the screen, and Autumn will put the link in there for you all. If you want to learn a little bit more about Sylvia and like the fact that she likes to read books and a little bit more about her kids, this is a wonderful spotlight that Bloomberg did. And I will also take a moment to invite you all. This is a bi-weekly series every other Friday at 3 Eastern. And joining me in 2 weeks is Lindsay Keck. She recently moved to Costa Rica and is sharing some of her experiences about, very much is related here, developing that cultural awareness and, you know, what it felt like for her to go from a space where she really didn't think about her identity to a space that she became that minority in the other and developing that appreciation. And so with that, again, I'll say thank you, Sylvia, for joining us. And I see the polling question is just about to wrap up. Thank you, all of you, for joining this program. It means so much to see so many people participating. And so with that, Autumn, I think it is officially time to close us out.